Okay, this is the presentation for the vulnerable population, and our population is grandparents raising grandchildren. So many times in life, people may have kids, and for unforeseen circumstances, the grandchildren will need to be taken care of by their grandparents, and this may this will be because of a variety of reasons, and many times there might be abuse going on, or maybe there might be drugs involved, but because of unforeseen things, the grandparents will be responsible enough to take care of the children and raise them. And something that is a big problem that grandparents struggle with is having a lack of support. A lot of times they just won't really get the support that they need, and they won't get as much support as the normal parents. And this lack of support is a big struggle. It can really bring on a lot of stress, and with this stress brings depression. And we don't like depression in our life. Depression really brings down the quality of our life. So the size of our population, our grandparents raising our grandchildren. I couldn't find any local statistics in Salt Lake City or Ogden, and I couldn't find any international statistics either. But statewide and in Utah, we have 18,758 grandparents that are raising grandchildren. And this comes out to be 0.62% of the total population of Utah. Couldn't quite figure out how many grandparents there were in Utah, but I figured out how many people there were, so I was able to figure it out that way. And we were able to compare it to the amount of grandparents raising their grandchildren in the U.S., and it comes out to be 2.7 million grandparents. And if we compare this to the population of the U.S., we have 0.81. So 0.81%. And so, as you can see, there's more per capita grandparents raising their grandchildren in the U.S. per capita than in Utah. So, seems that Utah might be doing a little better than the rest of the nation, according to this. Yep. So. I think a big misconception is that we feel that the grandparents are always very financially stable. And, I always remember looking back on my grandparents, and, they always take us to Texas Roadhouse or something, and, and money was just not an issue at all. But it's not always that way. 1 out of 5, 21%, so even a little more than 1 out of 5, but 1 out of 5 grandparents raising their grandchildren live under the poverty line, which is, it's not a majority, but it's still a lot. That's a lot of people that, are struggling. And 49% of grandmothers and 34% of grandfathers raising their grandchildren are unemployed, which it's a struggle because you're living under the poverty line, but you feel like you just can't get out of it because you're unemployed, and so that adds more stress. And 33% of grandparents didn't graduate high school, and so they can't really put that on their resume, and they just look like, on paper they just seem that like older people that don't have any education, so that adds extra stress. So as we talked about, there's an economic struggle with grandparents that are raising their grandchildren, and physically we think of older people as not being able to get around very easily. But actually, this is actually one thing that honestly this population might be actually a little better at than their other counterparts that are in their older years. Because when grandparents are raising their kids, they'll take them to the park, and then the kids will play at the playground, and then they'll be able to walk around, and they can take them places. But the best thing for them is to take them to places that will really build muscle and build bone mass, instead of going to the movies or going to a concert or something like that. Move on. Okay. So big root cause for this population is, it's the baby boomer population. If you've ever talked to a baby boomer, they feel like they need to, be very independent. And they're very proud to be baby boomers. They're very proud to live in the time that they did. And so they have this ideology where they kind of need to do things for themselves. And so something that's really hard is that even if you offer to do something for them, they'll say no. That's something really tough. And also within this is that when they're always being so independent, we build this stereotype that they're always well off. They're always just having a good time, and they're always able to pay for everything. But they're scrimping and saving, and it's hard, especially when they have kids to feed. So within the hierarchy of needs in Maslow, I kind of felt like the part where you either you make or break is on the love and belonging. While it's true, with the financial needs, somebody may not have the physiological needs or the safety needs. In some cases they might not have that, but I decided to go with love and belonging because of the statistics show that a lot of grandchildren that are being raised by their grandparents have emotional and behavioral problems. And so because of that, they might not be always as loving, and it might be kind of hard. And this takes a toll on the grandparents. Grandparents want to feel loved too. And after and even if they have unconditional love, it's hard to keep loving, if you know what I mean. And so with this, depression is very likely, and depression is something that has been talked about as something that could very well happen with the increased stress. So communicable diseases, just think of any, I just kind of thought that if a teacher, a school teacher, is always more susceptible to sickness because they're always going to school and being around the kids and getting sick. Well, those kids are getting sick and coming home to their grandparents, and the grandparents don't have the greatest immune systems. And so, if you name it, and they might be able to have it, cold, the flu, COVID right now, anything that might come around from not washing your hands and drinking out of the water fountain, and just not thinking straight as kids do, and coming home and bringing this sickness to their loved ones, which is their grandparents right now. Non-communicable diseases, some of these kids might be a little violent, and they might come and beat up grandma, beat up grandpa, and they don't realize it, and next thing you know, they're getting popped. And also, some kids are just really young and don't realize how fragile grandma and grandpa is, and they just ramming into them, just trying to play rough play. There's also, the mental anguish of, looking about the future and, realizing that they might not be around as long as, as a normal parent. So, self-care is sometimes looked at as something that, like, oh, I'm better than that, I don't need that. And, I've thought about that sometime in my life, being, the way I am. And I think, grandparents would kind of do the same thing, because, they're the baby boomer generation where, like, I don't need to, self-care and stuff like that. And so, and I don't need anybody to help me. So I think the best thing that we need to do is just kind of, encourage them to, accept help. Sometimes you just, they feel like they can do everything, and they've been doing everything so far in their life, and, but they'd be okay with somebody to help them out with things. So you just gotta, encourage them to take your help, take your love. Okay, we talked about earlier about how, they might be these individuals might be abused by the kids that's staying with them with emotional problems that are going on. And then there's also just kind of the normal abuse that goes along, elder abuse type of thing, where, these people might get frauded out in life, or, they you call them and they'll, believe anything and answer any email and be naive in that way. But there's also just kind of, even just being a normal, being abused, even without raising your grandchildren. Okay. And these are my references that I use within this presentation, and that's all.